The recent assassination of Mohsin Fakhrizadeh, a top Iranian nuclear scientist and a brigadier general in the elite Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. He was killed on the outskirts of Tehran, and his killing has triggered a new crisis in the West Asia. This killing has three countries involved: Israel, United States, and Saudi Arabia. These three countries are becoming allies in the Middle East against Iran. It is the most high-profile killing of an Iranian regime figure since the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, who commanded the Quds forces of the IRGC in January this year by the United States in Baghdad. Fakhrizadeh, according to the United States and Israel, had overseen Iran's nuclear weapons program in 1990s and early 2000s and remained a key figure in the country's nuclear development program. This killing comes at a crucial time for Iran. There are hopes that Joe Biden, the next American president, would return to talks, ending months of maximum pressure tactic adopted by the outgoing President Donald Trump, who took both countries to the brink of war after the killing of Soleimani. Iran had also increased the stockpile of low-enriched uranium beyond the limit set by the 2015 nuclear deal in the recent years. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, as on November 2nd, Iran had a stockpile of 2,400 kg of low-enriched uranium, much above the allowed limit of only 200 kgs. Iran started violating the terms of the nuclear deal called Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action after President Trump unilaterally pulled the United States out of the agreement in May 2018. The loss of Fakhrizadeh at the time when Iran is taking baby steps to expand its nuclear program, either as a strategy or as a bargaining chip, is a clear setback to Iranian plans. Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif has said that there are serious indications that Iran was involved in the attacks, and indeed it was. American media has quoted US intelligence sources as saying that the attack was carried out by Israel. In the past 10 years, at least 6 Iranian scientists, Masoud al-Mohammadi, Majid Shariari, Fardeen Abbasi Davani, Darush Razai, Mustafa Ahmad Roshan, and now Fakhrizadeh, were killed in bomb and gun attacks in which Israeli hands were suspected. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had called out Fakhrizadeh in a press conference in 2018. He said, and I quote, "Remember that name, Fakhrizadeh." And now Fakhrizadeh is dead, and the clear blame lies on Israel. The attack came weeks after President Trump reportedly sought options to bomb Iran before he leaves office in January 20th. He was dissuaded by his close aides. Later, Mike Pompeo, the US Secretary of State, traveled to Israel and held talks with Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Pompeo and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu then flew to the Neom, the futuristic megacity being built in Saudi Arabia, and they held secret talks with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. In the first direct talk between the top Iranian leader of Israel and the kingdom. It's hardly a secret that Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Trump administration would want to stop the Iran nuclear deal being revived, which could lead to the lifting of sanctions on Iran and leave the Islamic Republic stronger. When the leaders met in Neom, there were speculations that something was brewing in West Asia. Then came the attack on Fakhrizadeh. Iran has threatened to strike as thunder in retaliation. There are already protests in the country asking for revenge, but Iran's options against Israel appears to be limited unless Hezbollah, the Lebanese Shia militia cum political party, is ready to attack northern Israel from its base in southern Lebanon. What Iran can do, which it demonstrated in 2019 after Trump reimposed sanctions, is to target oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz or oil installation in the Sunni monarchies across the Gulf, including Saudi Arabia and many other Gulf countries. But Iran did not opt for an all-out war even after Soleimani was killed, though it threatened, but it did not opt for such a war. Its response was limited to targeting US bases in Iraq, and even that came after enough warnings so that US could take precautionary measures to protect its soldiers. Now the question is, what would Iran do if it wants to avenge the death of Fakhrizadeh? In recent months, Iran has come under great pressure as US sanctions wrecked its already bleeding economy. Israeli covert and overt operations raised questions about the efficacy of its security apparatus, and regional realignments posed new geopolitical risks. It lost a master strategist when Qasem Soleimani was killed. A mysterious explosion damaged a centrifuge assembly hall at its main nuclear site at Natanz this year. In Syria, Iranian assets and militias came under repeated attacks from Israeli jets in recent months when Vladimir Putin's Russia, an Iranian ally that practically controls Syrian airspace, looked away. And now it has lost a top nuclear physicist. Iran faces a growing dilemma. If it doesn't retaliate in the wake of repeated provocations, there would be questions, both inside and outside of the country, about its ability to protect the regime's top leaders or take countermeasures against what it calls terrorism of its sworn enemies. If it takes any major retaliatory step, it could escalate the conflict, providing room for Israel and the Trump administration to take rapid military steps, which would cut off the diplomatic path for Mr. Biden to take the United States back to the nuclear deal. Iran is stuck from both the sides. It's stuck from diplomatic process. It's stuck from the strategic position. Iran seems to have no way to engage in a war with Israel and United States, and now with Saudi Arabia.